This is She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. Your host, Kinsey Roberts, interviews incredible women in the wedding industry who are making their mark and creating success on their terms. Join the conversation.
Hello there. Welcome to episode 150 of She Creates Business, a podcast for wedding pros. This is your host, Kinsey Roberts. I'm a venue owner and educator. I also have this podcast where I interview women entrepreneurs in the wedding industry. We post new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. And thank you so much for celebrating 150 episodes with me. We're not doing anything crazy or any big celebrations. It's just you and I celebrating together. We are not stopping anytime soon. We definitely have 150 more episodes in us. I don't know why I keep using the plural. It's just me. I definitely have 150 more episodes in me. I love this show. So thank you very much for your support up to this point. It's been just over 3 years now. So it's been quite a while in podcast land. I know a lot of people are starting shows now, and I would love to see even more. But over 3.5 years is kind of like a grandpa in podcast world, even though they've been around for years and years and years. I'm excited to introduce my guest today, Lindsey Nickel. Before I get there, just a quick reminder. As I record this on November 10th, 2019, the She Creates content calendar is coming. That's 5 days from now as this podcast goes live. If you're listening anytime in the future, the content calendar is available. It's at shecreatesbusinesspodcast.com in my shop. The calendar is 365 days, you guys. That's every single day of the week. 365 days of marketing content specifically created just for wedding professionals. It's not general prompts. It's not for a general creative business. It's truly just for wedding professionals, just for you. I'm really proud of this product. I put a 6-month content calendar out earlier this year. It received a lot of amazing feedback, and so I'm really excited to bring a full year to you. It's going to have completely different prompts than my 6-month calendar, and I can't wait to put it in your hands. You can use it on social media, of course. You can use it as blog post ideas, as podcast ideas for your own podcast, as YouTube ideas for your own, educational YouTube channel. Really, the sky's the limit. So less than 35 cents a day. It's $127. Coming at you November 10th, 2019. I will see you there. If you're wondering how you can find out about it, there is a 2-week sample of my 6-month calendar on my website. You can go to shecreatesbusinesspodcast.com and then head to the content calendar page. It's right there in the navigation bar. If you sign up for the 2-week free sample, you will automatically be put on that email list, and you guys will be the first to know when the calendar launches on the 10th. So let's talk about Lindsey. Today, we're going to talk about expanding into a new market. And Lindsey has personally done this, and we go through this step-by-step process of how she did this in her own business. But let me tell you a little bit about her. She's the go-to marketing and business strategist for wedding planners who want to be fully booked with wonderful clients. She provides doable, focused action steps based on her many years as a wedding planner. Based in Napa, California, she's a Bay Area native with a passion for outdoor adventures and travel. Lindsey's work has been featured on CNN.com, Style Me Pretty, Brides, the Not Yours Truly book, and more. Today, we're specifically digging into how she began her planning business in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and how she expanded it to where she currently lives, which is the Bay Area of California. This is an awesome episode. Lindsey really goes step by step through the exact things she did to expand her business from Jackson Hole, Wyoming to Bay Area, California, how she got new clients, how she grew her business, how she maintained the old business that she had in Jackson Hole once she'd moved, and how she's kind of simultaneously running those now. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode with Lindsey. She has a lot of good tips for you. Let's head over to the episode with Lindsey Nickel from Lovely Day Events and Lovely Day Strategy. She's going to share how she expanded her wedding planning business from Jackson Hole, Wyoming to the Bay Area and California. Here we go. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. As we were discussing offline, I'm very much looking forward to talking specifically about expanding your market with your wedding planning business, and especially in these two markets that we're talking about today, Jackson Hole and Sonoma. I feel like this is going to be a really interesting conversation because these are high-end markets, especially Jackson Hole. And actually, I'm really interested to know your take on that because for me, Jackson Hole seems like the place the stars go to feel country. In addition to Aspen, which is close to where I live in Colorado. But so I'm interested to get like the insider scoop of these markets. But we will get into all of that, you guys. Before we get there, Lindsey, I'd love for you to take a minute or two just to tell everyone who you are and what you do in the wedding industry.
Yeah, so my name is Lindsey Nickel, and I own two businesses. I own Lovely Day Strategy, where I do marketing and business strategy for wedding planners who want to stand out and get booked with awesome clients. And then I also have a wedding planning business called Lovely Day Events, which I've had, oh my gosh, 10 years ago, I think I started it. And like you're going to hear more about in this podcast episode today, I started it 10 years ago in Jackson Hole, and now I'm in Jackson Hole and Napa Sonoma. So it's been a wild ride, but it's been a lot of fun.
So 10 years ago in Jackson Hole, tell me how you ended up there. Are you from there? Did you move there? I feel like, to me, again, Jackson Hole just feels very much like a tourist destination. So what were you doing there 10 years ago?
Totally. So I went there for the same reason a lot of people do when they're 22. I went there to be a ski bum, and right after college, like the day after, and you live someplace, you really love it. And, eventually I was realizing I didn't like to ski and be that cold, and you kind of move on from ski bum life to young professional life. And all of a sudden we had been there, living there for 10 years. And that's kind of the quick version of how I ended up there.
Yeah. So how did you get started as a wedding planner then?
Oh gosh. So that's a long story. So I'll give you a shorter version so I don't take the whole podcast up with that. But basically, if you remember when the economy was horrible and in the big recession, that is kind of when I was transitioning from being a ski bum and waiting tables. And I was a backpacking instructor, and I really wanted to do something more, young professional, day to day, like growing my career and starting my career. Excuse me. And, the economy was so bad. I was applying for jobs with nonprofits. I'd done a lot of freelance work for nonprofits doing events. So that was just sort of a natural fit. But like nobody was getting jobs, and people were applying for these jobs with like master's degrees who were like way overqualified and of course getting those jobs. And so I had this really amazing mentor, and I totally remember we were both standing outside of the place where we got our haircut, and she was showing me her new puppy, and she was like, how did it go with the blah, blah, blah job that I had just applied for? And I was like, I didn't get it. Someone else got it. And she's like, why don't you just start your own business? You've been talking about it. I know you're interested in it. Like, just do it, because there's not a lot of jobs out there. And that was sort of what sparked it, and went from there.
How did you mentioned you have a mentor, which that's really interesting, because I feel as if, I know mentorship, of course, has been around forever. How to Win Friends and Influence People was written 90 years ago. But I feel like, even 10 years ago, mentorship has kind of had this huge boon, right, in the last 3 to 5 years. But 10 years ago, that's pretty special. How did you find a mentor?
Yeah, so that was really cool. So when I lived in Jackson Hole, I actually had two businesses. I had this nonprofit consulting business, and I had this wedding planning business. And the wedding planning business, since the season is so short, like it was just snowing on September 28th in Jackson Hole. I don't know if you got that snow in Colorado, but I saw on Facebook there's quite a bit of snow in Jackson. And so wedding business was kind of my side business, and I had this nonprofit consulting business. And this woman was like the go-to in Jackson Hole, like tons of experience, huge career in nonprofits in Jackson Hole. And she had been a consultant for a nonprofit I was working with. And she just was like kind enough to take me underneath her wing and really be a confidant. And it was so great because in that, I guess back then, the more traditional sense of a mentor, it was like just this older person who had the career that I wanted to have at that time. And she would answer like any question I have and be really honest. And it was so nice because when you have a mentor that you have that relationship with, you can talk about truly like anything. We could talk about like how much should I be charging these people, or like, should I apply for this job or not? Or like, how do I deal with this client or this donor that is so challenging? And that person can give you, like, they don't have a, dog in the game of what's going to happen with you. They just want to see you succeed. They're not your boss. They're not your parent. They're not your roommate. So she really helped influence my career early on as far as like negotiating with people and navigating things and making decisions and helping me like get clarity in my businesses.
That's really special. That's such a special relationship, because you're so right. They are invested in you and want you to succeed, but they're not invested in you from like a familial standpoint or your best friend since childhood. They want to see you succeed professionally. And personally, of course. So you have that amazing relationship with them where they are on the periphery just enough to give you to give you kind of the good advice that might be hard to hear from someone else, but they really just have your best interest at heart.
Yeah, totally. And it really does help to like boost your confidence and see things that you hadn't seen, get introduced to people. Like I specifically know of at least one nonprofit consulting client that I got because this woman was my referral. So that, I mean, this should be another podcast topic that we can talk about. And like, I could go on for like hours about like mentors and how to find one and like cultivate that relationship. But like, that's one of my biggest tips for people who are either new in an industry or like just out of college. So you could really be any age, and is like find a mentor because it's such a influential and growing relationship in your career and in your life. It's something that everybody, I think, hopefully has like the opportunity to experience at least once.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. All right. So you started your planning company. Jackson Hole is not very big. What is it? 10,000 people?
10,000 people in the town, about 20,000 people in the county.
Mm-hmm. That's relatively small. I mean, I get it. I live in a small town as well, but that's relatively small. So tell me, and I know this is a lot, but just tell me how you grew your business. Who were your main clients? Were they people from town? Were they tourists? Were they destination couples? Talk to me about your business, how you grew your business, who your main clients were. What did that look like for Lovely Day?
Yeah, totally. So, when I first started, when I very, very, very first started in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm gonna like have this event business, and it's gonna be a lot of nonprofit stuff, and I'm going to just do that. And then someone else who had also had a much longer career than me in life, she was like, why don't you do weddings also? Because you could make money doing weddings in the summer in Jackson. And I was like, okay, let's throw that into the mix. And I actually called it back then, the business was called Events, Etc., because the events part, and then the etc. part was like literally whatever else people wanted me to help them with. So it was like this catch-all name back then. And one of the things I did, so I had kind of talked to people, I researched online. Facebook like existed back then. But like Facebook groups definitely didn't exist. Facebook pages definitely didn't exist. Instagram didn't exist. So you just had like the internet and you like kind of had Facebook, but it was a small town. So you had word of mouth. So the first thing I did for the event part was basically made a list of everybody in town who did some sort of events or was a venue and went out and met them. And the best relationship I got out of that, or one of the best relationships, was a country club. And they were like, sent me my first client basically. And then one of my other first clients, the first actual wedding that I did, was a guest ranch, like a dude ranch that was really small. And I loved it. It was like kind of, if there's such a thing as like hole in the wall, it was hole in the wall. Like nobody knew about it, even though you walked right past it on this really popular hike. And I had helped them like with some catering. And I just called them and was like, I'm doing weddings now. Like, can I come and talk to you about that? And I just had a list and went through the list. And that's how I got my first clients. And my very first referral was actually this lady that I used to like nanny share for. Like I was the nanny and she was an event. So of course I had told her like, I had actually asked her like, will you look at my website? And then like a couple weeks later or something, I got this phone call out of the blue and she was like, oh, Patrice was her name. Patrice told me you're doing events and like, I'm getting married. Can we talk? And that was like the first person I ever booked.
That is, what I love about this strategy is that it's not easy to do, but it's so simple. Making a list of people and then going and meeting those people. That's not easy, but it's simple. And it's something that we can all still do today and should be doing.
Totally.
So
and it's
smart.
Literally the exact same thing I did when I moved out to wine country. I was like, okay, this worked in Jackson Hole. These are very similar demographics. And we have the internet now and we have Facebook more robust and we have like the not more robust 5 years ago. So I just hopped online and was like, there's obviously way more options in all of wine country, and kind of looked for people that were similar to my style, similar ideal client, venues I would want to work with. And I focused mostly on venues because I knew at that point, most of my referrals were coming from venues. So I was like, I'm just going to start with venues because like I want to meet the florist, but they're not going to send me as many referrals as a venue.
That's right. That's true. And were there a lot of venues in Jackson Hole at that time?
No, to be honest. Back then, I don't know. I could probably think of like 5 to 10 that people like knew about, but there was like a handful that were like the go-tos. Like we had the Four Seasons still back then. And there was like another Hotel Terra. And there was like a couple ranches that everybody knew about. But I would say there's like 5 people could rattle off immediately. Like these 5 places do weddings. And then if they sat and like kind of thought about it, there might be like 10. And now, Jackson, like you've said, has become so popular and more people know about it and a lot more people are coming there.
Right.
There's more options, but it's still a small town.
So who's your typical, like, what's your typical client profile there in Jackson?
Yeah, so it's actually the same, I would say, for Wine Country and Jackson. So I always say, like, we work with stylish, hands-on couples that want to be involved in planning their wedding, but they want to have fun on their wedding day. And usually what they say, like, the number one things are for them is everybody, like their friends and family, being together. And then if they're getting married in Wine Country, they'll, of course, also say the food and wine. Mm-hmm. And then people also say, like, they love to be outdoors, they love to hike, they love to try new restaurants. We get a lot of people in their early 30s. We get a lot of people from some sort of city area. So in Jackson Hole, it's actually not a lot of people that are from Jackson. And I think that's twofold. I think, A, there's just not a lot of people in Jackson.
Right.
And then now that I've pivoted to a higher price point and more of like the luxury market, that is just not as attainable for as many people who live in Jackson, unfortunately.
Because it's funny, I live in a tourist area as well. So it's interesting. And this it does have to do with weddings, but not totally. But it's interesting when you live in an area like Jackson Hole, like I do near Aspen, near Glenwood Springs, that we have tourism classification and designation. So it drives up the cost of everything. But the people who actually live here are working in because the towns are so small, there's very little industry. There's very few big companies providing a lot of jobs. And so the people who actually live here 365 every single day are working jobs that don't pay very well, like working those seasonal jobs. They're a skied instructor in the winter and they may work at a hotel in the summer.
Totally. Jackson Hole, the same thing. And then you probably have the same hurdles and problems with housing. Where are all these people going to live? Where are they going to live affordably? And it's a real problem out here too. So I don't know what's in the future for all those little mountain towns and for all these like beautiful rural communities that everybody wants to live in. And you need that workforce industry to serve them. Everybody from like people working in the restaurants all the way through like the person who drives the ambulance.
That's right.
So it's I think a really common problem in high-end rural areas.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. Okay, sorry about that tangent, you guys. That could be another talk. That's another talk, Lindsey.
Talk about with you.
Yeah, we have so much to chat about. Okay, so you're planning events, you're growing your business. Clearly, it's worked out for you. It's been 10 years. You're still a planner, both in Jackson Hole and now in Napa, Sonoma. But you transitioned your business. So how long were you in Jackson before you and your husband were like, okay, we're making the move to California, I guess? Was that scary? Tell us about how that all transpired and the impetus for you to say, that's okay, I can just expand my business.
Okay, so this is a crazy story.
Yeah.
So we lived in Jackson for 10 years. We were together for 10 years and we got married, and so we were like, yay, we got married. This is great. And then so that was September. And then in October, again, very long story short, my husband had an opportunity to open his own business, which would be a cigar store in Napa.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. So and I'm from the Bay Area. So, and I was cold in Jackson Hole as much as I love it. The winters are so long. So it was like, okay, if we're really going to move and you're really going to have the opportunity to like run your own business and have your own business, like, let's do it. So we got married in September. This started in October, and in February, mid-February, we drove out to the Bay Area.
Oh, wow.
And we lived with my aunt and uncle for 2 months while we kind of like got settled. And so he opened the cigar store, and I kind of realized while all this was happening that I couldn't do both of these businesses. Like I couldn't do the nonprofit consulting and do the weddings. It was just like way too much to take on in this brand new market. And I chose weddings because I was like, I really enjoyed both of them. So then I was like, okay, well, what else is there for getting them started? And weddings honestly seemed a lot more fun and faster to start than building a whole network of like donors and people at nonprofits and things like that. And also the power of having like an online presence doesn't exist, or at least didn't exist back then, for like a nonprofit consultant moving from like a tiny town in Wyoming to like the giant Bay Area. But being a rural high-end wedding planner in a small Wyoming town translated very well to quote unquote rural wine country in California.
Because you mentioned earlier that they're a similar client profile for you.
Very, very similar. So this is something people always ask. They're like, what's it like planning weddings in Jackson Hole? Because a lot of people, like, you're like, Yellowstone National Park. And they're like, where's that? They think it's, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, which I totally understand. Yeah. Wyoming is the least populated state in the country. Most people don't know someone who's lived there before. So Jackson Hole and wine country, at least our wine country, they're both high-end visitors. They're both expensive to live in. They both have housing problems, like we just talked about. They're both beautiful. They're both rural, and they're both something that I think are on everybody's like bucket list to go check out. So it was very easy in that part. I think it would have been a lot harder for me if I was going from like rural ranch and horses in Wyoming to like San Francisco, where now I'm like, where are they going to park?
Right.
How are the Ubers going to drop them off? You need permits for everything. So that was actually pretty easy, because it was just like basically instead of a ranch, now we're doing a winery ranch.
Well, and much like Jackson Hole is the main economy in the Napa-Sonoma area, tourism?
Yes and no. So the main economy is wine, because wine country.
Sure.
But everybody is coming here to enjoy the wine.
Right.
So like I think so that makes sense. Like making the wine and all of that is number one, but like very close or like tangent to that is like the tourism that it brings in.
So from a practical perspective, how did you transition your business? And I mean that, how did you add it to your website? How did you start offering your services? You mentioned that it was a similar situation where you kind of made a list and started going out. Tell us about those practical, very pragmatic tips that you used to get your name out in Napa-Sonoma to grow your business there.
Totally. So I kind of just started over as if you were starting any business. I made a business plan. So I had like steps that I was going to do. And part of that was this big list of people I had found online that I was going to contact. I redid my website because, again, when you live in a really small town, everybody knows everybody. So you can have like an okay website and be fine. But now, not only was I coming to like a much larger area where nobody knew me, but it was like the tech center of the world.
Right.
So you have to have a good website out here. So I totally remade my website on Squarespace, which I'm a huge fan of Squarespace for anybody looking to do a new website. Made a new website on Squarespace. And then also I found having my reviews online like up to date, and a lot of them really helped. That just really added like authenticity. So I had a new website that I had built on Squarespace, and then I had a lot of reviews, and then I had the business plan, and I had the list of venues I was going to go meet basically. And that was truly like the start of it. And then once I started meeting people, I would ask for like other introductions. So I remember like one caterer that I met in the beginning, I was like, I can't really find a DJ that I'm like really clicking with or like really excited to work with. And he was like, you got to work with these guys, and sent me an email introduction to them. And like to this day, they're still the DJ we work with the most and refer the most. So not being afraid, kind of like in the beginning, the first time, don't be afraid to like put it out there. Don't be afraid to ask for referrals, ask for advice, and go to networking events. So that was another thing I did. I looked online to see like what the local associations were. And we have ILEA out here. I know there's different ones everywhere. And I just started attending like all of these networking events that ILEA was hosting. And we also have a lot of just like industry events here. So it's like a new venue, or like every spring, this venue has a big industry event for anybody in the event industry. So just attending as many of those as I could. And I remember being terrified going to these because I wouldn't know anybody.
Right.
And these people all know each other, and they're in wine country, and they've been doing this for a long time. And I remember like reading on my phone in the parking lot, like tips for networking, like, oh my God, I'm terrified. But it got easier and easier as I got to know people. And then I would do the trick of like hand out 3 business cards and then I can leave. So, but it's just like, you got to just keep showing up and keep interacting with people and then following up with them too. And get ready for like a lot of no's and radio silence because people are just busy. And some people were like, why are you starting a wedding planning business here? We have enough like people literally said that, a couple people. And now I wish I could remember who they were.
They said, why are you starting? We have enough.
Why we have enough wedding planners? Like other wedding planners would say that.
Really?
Yeah. But I was like, oh my gosh, now I wish I knew who that person was to be like, I'm still here.
Yeah. Are you? Maybe you don't know who they are because they're not there anymore.
No, exactly. That's why I'm so curious. I wish I could go my time machine and see who they were.
Well, let's unpack some of these steps a little bit because, I mean, we just mentioned them in quick succession, but really they all take a little bit of time and they all take some forethought. So the first thing you said you did is you wrote a business plan. So you wrote a business plan specifically for this area. How did you know what you were putting in this business plan was applicable to the area? Talk to me about that research.
So I really just kind of went on what already worked. So like I'd been to wine country and I'd seen it because we were going to move here. Okay. And I looked at it and I researched it online. I'm like, okay, I see what this is. And I feel like I'm pretty business savvy. And, I'd had 2 businesses in Jackson, like before I turned 31. And I was like, okay, it was a pretty standard business plan. It was just for me. I wasn't getting a loan or anything, but I wanted to stay on track and I wanted to know like what I was doing. And I wanted to know like how I was going to fill my days because I was still working, going out and meeting people and networking and marketing, even though I wasn't booking clients or doing weddings immediately in the beginning. So having that written down, like a calendar to stay on track. And so it wasn't super detailed, I would say, looking back on it, but like it was enough to like stay on course and have a direction I wanted to go and have goals that I wanted to hit. And that does really help to like focus your attention and not have like shiny object syndrome of like, oh, now I'm going to do this and now I'm going to do this. And I remember one time I was like, maybe I should just like not do this and like work in a tasting room instead. So you have to have fairly thick skin to get going. Just like when you start your business the first time, it's extremely similar to starting your business the first time. You just have more knowledge.
So that's interesting that you say that. You mentioned that there was a little bit of a lull because in the beginning you weren't doing weddings right away. What you were doing, what filled your days was, creating your business in that area, meeting with people, keeping a calendar, but still actively working on your business, but you weren't actually doing events. And then you also just said, I don't want to shine a light on this because this is important. You mentioned that you had periods of doubt where you said that, oh gosh, should I just go to a tasting room because this is hard? How did you work through those periods of doubt to keep going? And what was the lull time between moving from Jackson Hole to California and when you hosted your first wedding?
Okay, there's so many good questions. Okay, so in the beginning, we moved out here in like the springtime. I'm just thinking back because it was like 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
We moved out here in the springtime and we really got my husband's business going first. Mm-hmm. So that brings us to like midsummer. And so since we had moved so quickly, I still had weddings and I still had a team in Jackson Hole that I was leading basically and weddings I was doing. So I had those weddings to work on and like that team to manage. And then so I'm meeting people like by the fall probably. And, in the fall, people are booking for the next year. It's not like it's pretty rare, at least, that you book somebody in September and then like their wedding is in December or March.
That's right.
So I probably started booking people, I'm guessing like in the fall and definitely in January, but then for like the fall. So, the wedding is still like 6 or 9 months away. And then the part about the doubt was I remember really like sitting down and thinking like, what is going to like get my business going the fastest? And I was like, I have to pick between like making money immediately right now in Napa or putting all my time and effort into the wedding business. And in my head, I was like, I don't want to work in a tasting room forever. Like what I want to do is launch my wedding business. So I was like, I have to stick with it. And it worked out because I was able to put 100% of my time and work hours to the wedding business instead of like 60% of my time to another job and only 40% to the wedding job.
Yeah.
I don't think my wedding business would have made it because I wouldn't have put enough time in and people wouldn't have seen me enough. I wouldn't have been able to meet with potential clients as frequently.
That's so true. That's a hard decision. I like that you actively thought through that. What the percentage of time that you just mentioned, like 60. We're at our jobs so much, our 9-to-5 jobs. And so that's a hard decision. I appreciate that you thought through that so well, because it's true. It's not easy to continue to build up a business if you want it to be your full-time business. Not that any people haven't done it. They do it all the time. And friends listening, this is not me telling you to quit your jobs. Please don't hear what I'm not saying.
Yes, exactly.
But that's a difficult decision to make, and I appreciate that you had to make that decision so early on. So you mentioned that you still had a team in weddings happening back in Jackson Hole. Obviously you mentioned that you were planning those, remotely, or helping them with those weddings remotely. But did you have to travel back to Jackson at all to do weddings during this transitional period?
Yep. So it kind of has worked out over the years that my husband and I will just go back every summer, and I'll do the weddings, and he just vacations, to be honest. He gets to go fishing with his friends and hiking and enjoy the vacation life. And then I work and I do the weddings, and it's kind of looked like different things each year. But yeah, so I had a team there, and I really enjoyed it. They were fantastic gals, and they were really good planners. It just became very stressful for me to be in another time zone. So if God forbid something did happen on the wedding day, Jackson's such a small town. There's 5 planners, and if all 5 of the planners are working, and when someone on our team has an emergency, who's going to step in that day? I can't just start driving. It's 14 hours. So it just became very stressful for me to be that far away. And as the wedding industry as a whole kind of evolved, it sort of has made sense to be where I am now, of charging them a lot more and doing less, less weddings total, so that I can give each of those clients even more attention.
So now, as your business stands, and definitely correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like in the summer months, you and your husband live in Jackson, you're doing weddings in Jackson, but in the non-summer months, y'all are living in California, and you're doing weddings in California in those non-summer months.
Yeah, pretty close. So it's not necessarily summer per se. It's just sort of where do the weddings fall? Sometimes I'll just fly out on my own to do the wedding, and I'll come back. Sometimes one time my husband will come, and then I'll do a wedding, and then we'll go on vacation afterwards. So we don't spend the whole summer in Jackson Hole, but it kind of has varied between 2 and 6 weeks. And then I fly back and forth as needed for the meetings and things like that.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds like a really active and fun way to run your company. Have you found that? Do you enjoy that still? Are you looking at transitioning out of that and just sticking in California? What does the future of your business look like?
So it's such a good question. So I have transitioned a little bit, like I said, to do less weddings in Jackson Hole, but more of just that super perfect ideal client, and more of that really beautiful wedding that I can pour everything I have into it, and the client appreciates all of that, and it really has to be the right person now. And I am very grateful that I still have these fabulous girls in their 20s that live in Jackson. So I have my assistants that still live there who are we'll come help you. And so I have that. And then I have the weddings in wine country where our season is much longer. It's the end of April through the beginning of November, essentially. And also getting really going with my new business of the coaching wedding planners in their own businesses.
Yeah. You mentioned that as you were, I think earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that you do marketing and strategy for planners, which is what you said is kind of what you want to continue to grow. How does that fit into your current schedule of still being an active wedding planner?
So it's actually all sort of starting to parallel when I moved out here. I've been realizing about being very cognitive with my time and very specific. I have a very loose business plan. I've worked with some coaches and, just basically following the steps of the business plan, but it is more challenging this time around to really divide my time up. Of course, clients I already have come first, people who are getting married and any coaching clients, those always come first. And then it sort of is the marketing for each of those after that. And I am very, very fortunate that I have been doing this for a long time, and I have a lot of local connections and referrals and amazing reviews online. So I've been able to let the marketing end of my wedding planning business coast a little bit this year so that I can put effort into growing my coaching business.
Oh, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that, because as of now, how long has it been? How long have you been a planner?
10 years.
10 years.
10
Okay.
seasons, I guess is the right term.
I know. I never know. I'm like 10 seasons. I don't know yet. So
I don't know.
11 years, 10 seasons, whatever it
Yeah.
is. We'll just say 10 years because that sounds so easy. I'm glad you shined a light on that because it's, if you haven't been in business for over a decade, or not necessarily over a decade, but it's interesting because what Lindsey is saying is because she has been in business for over a decade, because she has built such a solid clientele, she has those reviews, she's done a lot of marketing, for years and years. That's what has allowed her to kind of coast on that marketing and coast on that reputation this last year to grow another part of her business. That's not a strategy that would work for somebody who's in their first 1 to 3 to 4 years in business, potentially, depending on, how big or fast you've built your business. But I think it's really important to understand that instead of trying to, and I'm kind of talking to myself here because I love to have my hands in a lot of different projects, but it's important to know that if we can stick with one thing, like one project, in this case, wedding planning, and really build that up to something that is sustainable and consistent, it's so much easier in a lot of ways to then move on to something else because this other thing that you've built can continue to live on its own, like your planning business has lived, this last year without you being super hardcore into the marketing of it.
Yeah, you completely nailed it. That's exactly it. And I will tell you, it was terrifying at the beginning of the year when I was like, okay, I stopped almost all of my paid advertising. I stopped going to in-person networking events. I would only go to one a month. So it was very terrifying in the beginning, especially for somebody I love marketing and I love having my hands in that. And I know how important it is to stay top of mind, but it was very terrifying in the beginning. Is the phone still going to ring if I skip this networking event? So it was really terrifying. But again, it was just a conscious decision of I have to make the space in my life somewhere and I can't work 17 hours a day. And now that it's kind of happened and I'm whatever month we're in now, end of October, is having that confidence in yourself of I have built this brand and I have strong relationships and just kind of having a little trust in the system, I guess, right, that it will kind of work out. And then the other side that is something people talk about a lot now is that mindset shift of, okay, I need to say no to clients that I might have taken for wedding planning. I need to charge more so that the people I can take less weddings, but also give them even more attention again, so I can have the same income, but create more time and space to grow this second business, which I think would really be applicable to anybody's businesses.
That's right. That's so good. All right. As we wind down here, what is maybe just your top two? We've talked about a lot and you've shared so much, and thank you so much for doing that. If somebody just had to ask you, listen, I am moving, or maybe I'm not moving physically, but I want to expand into a new market, what are your top 2 tips for that person?
Okay, so I wrote down a couple of tips because I thought about that. I was what were my best tips?
Ooh, I love
this.
So
my best tips, I have 4, but I'll make them short.
No, tell us 4. Yeah, I love it.
Okay, perfect. So the first one we didn't touch on in our little chat, but I would definitely say check out what your name is if someone already has your name, basically, in wherever you're expanding to, because that did happen to me, and that was one of the reasons I changed my name. So check and see if your name, your business name, already exists, and because you might have to change it, or also just make sure your name still works. So if your name is Big Ranch Weddings and you're moving to a city, that's probably not going to work anymore. So really think about the name, the URL, all of those things. Will that work in your new place? Because you don't want to be confused for someone else, and they don't want to get mistaken for you either.
Yes.
Definitely build your online presence through reviews and your website, and now of course Instagram and Facebook. That online presence, I was really surprised even back then how much weight and authenticity that carried. So they were oh, okay, you do these things, and I looked at your website, that checks out.
Is that tip number 2?
Yeah, so that's number 2, build your online presence. And then number 3 is sort of an offshoot of that, is the online reviews. Online reviews are so valuable for so many reasons, but I was really surprised how much they helped expand my second business in the new location, because again, it's just immediate authenticity, immediate authority, immediate for a client of oh, this is what it's like to work with this person. And I feel I know this person just from reading this review, and this is the experience I want. So definitely build up those online reviews. And then the last one is meet as many vendors as possible. Like, I know you talk a lot about venues. So like if you're opening a new venue, like have a mixer, but also invite people like one-to-one to come see. Cause those one-to-one relationships, I always find to be like so much more valuable and richer than when you go to a mixer with like all your friends and hang out and have a great time. And like, it's fun, you get to see it, but to actually like build that relationship and get and give the referrals one-to-one for sure. And if you're a planner, start with the venues, contact those venues, meet them, get to know them, and see who would be like a good match for your clients.
Those are amazing, Lindsey. Thank you. So I'm just going to wrap these up for you guys. And these will be in the show notes, of course. So everything Lindsey mentioned today will be in the show notes. But check your name. Does it work in the area as far as branding? Also, most importantly, does anyone already have that name? Are you going to have to change your business name or at least have a new name in this new area? Number 2, build your online presence, focus on those online platforms, your website, your blog, your social media handles, etc. Number 3, online reviews, build them up. They're valuable. They create instant authority. They create instant brand recognition. So build them up. Number 4, meet as many vendors as possible. I love how you differentiated between, yes, of course, join mixers, join networking events, but also focus on those one-to-one meetings because that's where relationships are really built.
100%. Like they're both important just for different reasons, but some of those people that I met in those first one-to-one meetings are like my best friends now.
Yeah, that's a really valuable point. Lindsey, this has been such a great conversation. Where can everybody find you and connect with you online?
Okay, so they can find me online at my website, lovelydaystrategy.com, and on Instagram, same thing at lovelydaystrategy.
At Lovely Day Strategy. And you have a sweet little freebie at lovelydaystrategy.com. Will you tell us about it?
Yeah, so we have this awesome mini course. It's an email course. It's called How to Stand Out in a Flooded Wedding Planner Market, because I keep hearing from people, even if they're in a small town, like there's so many wedding planners, there's so many whatever. I mean, it's specifically for wedding planners, but you could apply these tips and instructions to anybody. So it's lovelydaystrategy.com/stand-out-course. So stand out course, and it's totally free.
Perfect. And that will also be in the show notes. Lindsey, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and for you just being so generous with my audience. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kinsey. It was really fantastic. I loved talking about this topic.
I did as well. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to She Creates Business. Please take a minute and head to iTunes to leave an honest review so we can help more wedding pros find the show.